Representative Steve Scalise was the victim of an incredibly tragic shooting earlier this year when he was practicing softball with some Republican representatives, and a crazed man showed up and opened fire, attempting to kill people who were at the scene. Now, Steve Scalise was shot. He was severely injured and in critical condition, but luckily he seems to be recovering and is expected to make a full recovery. And so following this mass shooting that occurred in Las Vegas, it would be interesting to hear what his perspective is on the issue of gun control. Has he changed his mind? Is he still an advocate of loosening restrictions to guns? Well, let's take a look at the first video and find out.
Inevitably, questions about the Second Amendment are raised by what happened in Las Vegas. It happens almost immediately. Have your experience of your own and what you saw in Las Vegas, has it changed how you feel about any of that?
I think it's fortified it because, first of all, you've got to recognize that when there's a tragedy like this, the first thing we should be thinking about is praying for the people who were injured and doing whatever we can to help them, to help law enforcement. We shouldn't first be thinking of promoting our political agenda. And I think we see too much of that where people say, oh, okay, now you have to have gun control. Well, first of all, look at some of those bills. Those bills wouldn't have done anything to stop this. I mean, the gunmen actually cleared background checks. Yeah. So to promote some kind of gun control, I think is the wrong way to approach this.
So he would have cleared background checks, to be clear. But I am not buying the argument that the only thing we should be doing right now is praying. First of all, we live in a country that is supposed to value freedom of religion, which means freedom from religion as well. So no, I don't want to pray for the victims. I feel terrible for the victims. I'd like to do something to prevent future victims. I think that it's already far too late in our inaction. And even though background checks wouldn't have impacted or affected Paddock in this case, the fact that he was able to legally purchase an item that made his semi-automatic weapon essentially an automatic weapon is a little bit of a problem. High-capacity magazines, maybe banning those would have an impact on mass shootings like this. Maybe it would lead to less carnage. But it's the most incredible thing about this video and what Scalise is saying is that he himself was the victim of a shooting and he hasn't changed his mind. That NRA money is real sweet if you value it more than your own life.
Yeah, well, I like that his idea of a smart thing to say after a tragedy is, hey, nobody try to think of solutions right now, okay? That's basically what he's saying. This isn't the time for solutions to a problem that keeps happening. What we should do is keep praying. We pray every time, right? Seems like that's not working. We're praying every time there's a shooting, there's still more shootings, but you still want to keep doing that. You just don't want to think of other solutions. This is the weirdest thing to watch grown-up elected officials almost bragging that they have no ideas on how to fix a problem. Hey, that law wouldn't even have fixed it. So, just keep praying. I don't have any ideas on how to fix this. I have no new solutions, nothing. This is just going to keep happening. If that was a Muslim, they would start tapping your phone. Oh, wait, they already did tap our phones. Oh, they already do have every email I send. Oh, they already do have every text that I send. I already do live in a surveillance state. They already did repeal habeas corpus because of 3,000 people got killed by terrorists 16 years ago. But it happens every day. We have a mass shooting and we can't do anything about it. Why? Because corruption. And no one's going to say that word corruption. They'll say it's because of money. They'll say it's because of greed. They'll say it's because of cowardice, which it is, all those things. But what's really about is the way we run our government. Our government is run on corporate cash, which is corrupting 100%. You see it right here, right? That's what this is. That's Steve Scalise, a guy who took a bullet himself, is so corrupted. The culture is so corrupted that he knows if he stands up and does the right thing, his whole career will be shattered. So he'd rather have one of his bones shattered or somebody else shoot another part of his body to get shattered than to ruin his career. That's who Steve Scalise is. That's the kind of cretins who now fill our government from top to bottom. That's where we're at, corruption. And Barack Obama came out after Sandy Hook and he said, you got to call your senators, you got to call your congressmen, call your politicians, elected officials, but he would never say because they're corrupted. And we know what the problem is, they're corrupted and we got to get money out of politics. Absolutely. And that's what we have to do.
So I want to jump in quickly because a lot of times the issue of gun control is presented as a left versus right issue, right, where it appears that those on the right are never in favor of any type type of gun control legislation whatsoever. But that's actually not true. Now, Republicans are certainly more protective of Second Amendment rights. However, when it comes to common sense gun legislation, Pew Research shows that the majority of Republicans are actually in favor of that legislation. I want to give you some examples. Let's go to graphic 7A. So in April 2017, Pew Research Center poll found that 76% of Republicans and Republican-leaning independents believe it is more important to protect the rights of Americans to own guns than it is to control gun access, right? So that's fair. We knew that already. But what about some gun legislation that makes sense? Well, Pew found this year that 77% of Republicans favored background checks for private sales and at gun shows, and 54% favored banning assault-style weapons.
Wow.
And so these statistics are important because I think it's actually incredibly unfair to allow, lobbying groups and corrupt organizations like the NRA paint a picture and generalize about Republicans, when in reality, a lot of Republicans out there are actually, pretty reasonable when it comes to some of this gun legislation. But you'll have these Republican lawmakers who are corrupt, who are funded by either gun manufacturers or the NRA. They'll come out and say, no, there's no solution. Sorry, Second Amendment. They want to ban all your guns. That's what they want to do. They want to ban all your guns, and you won't be able to protect yourself. You won't be able to stand up against a tyrannical government. Any type of excuse to maintain the current system that we have in place right now, and it's disgusting. Let's take a look at one more video, and then when we come back, Ron, I want to hear your thoughts.
Okay.
And frankly, what I experienced was when there was a shooter, luckily we had Capitol Police there with their own guns. Every single day in America, regular citizens that just have a passionate belief in the Second Amendment, that have their own guns, use guns every single day to protect themselves against criminals. And those stories never get told, or hardly ever get told. But that's a different side of the story that I think is important, that people use guns way more to defend themselves from criminals than criminals using guns to hurt people.
Yeah, so if everyone at that music festival, the 22,000 people who were at that country music festival, just took out their guns and started shooting at the 32nd floor of Mandalay Bay, we would have just taken out the bad guy, we would have defended ourselves. I mean, come on. Anyway.
Well, I don't know. He might kind of have a little bit of a point. The other day, I was walking around in my neighborhood, and I saw this nice gentleman with a gun help an old lady across the street. He was using the gun to guide her, and I thought, where's the press? I wanted to, no, I think Steve Scalise just threw a straw man out there. He must be getting ready for Halloween. And there's this weird stigma where, like kind of what you were saying, Jimmy, guns is the only issue where when you bring up the solution, hey, we need a common sense weapons policy in this country. We're the only nation that's just so out of hand like this. And people are like, you're politicizing it. This is the only issue where something like that happens. You never hear somebody like, man, we got to do something about real poverty. Now's not the time. There's people starving to death. Like, yeah, that's the point.
Can you imagine if after the World Trade Center was attacked on centers were attacked on 9/11. If anyone had the audacity to say, no, wait a minute, no, we can't have any policy. We can't do anything to protect Americans. We need to just stop, not politicize this, and pray for people. Let's just pray for people. No, the government took action right away. In fact, the government took ridiculous, they used that tragedy to, as an excuse to take ridiculous actions in regard to foreign policy. And, Democrats honestly just sat there and took it, which was disgusting. But in this case, you're not allowed to talk about, legislation that would prevent something like this from happening in the future. And when this story first broke, there was this feeling of despair that I had because I knew the type of discourse we were about to engage in. And that just adds insult to injury, right? It's such a tragic story. So many innocent people lost their lives that day. And while you're feeling the despair in regard to the number of people who lost their lives and the number of people who are injured, you just feel worse once you think about what's about to follow. And sure enough, this is exactly what follows.
Well, after Sandy Hook, I have no confidence in any type of common sense a weapons policy in this country. I just don't, especially with the stronghold that the NRA has, which you really don't hear anyone in the political spectrum, Republican or Democrat, because some Democrats get some of that cash too.
Absolutely.
You really don't hear them bringing that up. That the NRA just has us by the gullet, and I just after we decided it's okay for this to happen to children. I have no confidence in any common sense gun control in this country, which is very sad.
Well, the Princeton study, which we're all familiar with here, proved that we have no influence over the kind of legislation that gets passed. Who does? Moneyed interests. So that's why we don't have any gun legislation. In fact, the thing that's even crazier, Anna, is that the Republicans are trying to relax gun restrictions even now. So the last two, they wanted to make it easier for the silencers.
Yep.
And there was one other gun thing they wanted to relax, make it easier to buy guns. They had to postpone both of those votes in Congress because of shootings. Isn't that ironic? When Steve Scalise got shot the first time, they had to postpone that vote then, and now they had to postpone another vote because of this mass shooting. Shouldn't that be telling you something? Hey, if we have to keep postponing votes to relax gun laws because of mass shootings, maybe there's a problem with gun laws and we should increase them instead of relax them. But no, that's not gonna happen. Again, we live in a banana republic. Everybody's corrupted in this goddamn government because of money in politics, and there's no better example of it than guns.
If you like this video, you'll love the whole TYT network. Check it out at tytnetwork.com/join.